Hi guys and welcome to Crazy Pepper Revenge. This channel is all about crazy true stories, stuff that happens in real life when things get a little bit messy.
So this happened at my wife's company holiday party last December, and I never thought I'd be that guy who ends up in a physical confrontation at a corporate event, but here we are. My wife, Elise, had been hyping up this party for weeks, talking about the venue, the catering, the whole production. Her company goes all out every year. Fancy hotel ballroom downtown, open bar, live music, the whole 9 yards. They spare no expense when it comes to these annual celebrations. I threw on my best suit, the charcoal one I save for important occasions. Not to impress anyone, really, just because Elise deserved to have a partner who looked presentable and put together for her big work event. The night started off pretty normal, almost boring in that comfortable corporate way. Met her boss, a friendly enough guy who seemed genuinely interested in his employees' lives. Chatted with some folks from the finance department about market trends and quarterly projections. Had a surprisingly decent conversation with someone from HR about hiking trails in the Cascades and the best time of year to visit. Elise was absolutely in her element, moving gracefully from group to group, introducing me around with this genuine pride in her voice that made me feel 10 feet tall. She had this glow about her, the kind you get when you're comfortable in your professional space and excited to share it with someone you love. That's when I noticed this dude across the room, and the vibe immediately shifted. He'd been staring at us for like an hour straight, not even trying to be subtle about it. Tall guy, probably mid-30s, built like he lived at the gym and wanted everyone to know it. You know the type. Takes up way more space than necessary, arms crossed over his chest, chin up like he's posing for an invisible camera or waiting for someone to acknowledge his presence. Total peacock energy radiating off him in waves. Elise had mentioned him before, in passing, usually with an eye roll. Always going on about his truck modifications, his hunting trips to Montana or Wyoming, his CrossFit times and personal records. The kind of guy who turns every single conversation into a story about how tough and capable he is, how he can handle any situation. She'd roll her eyes when talking about him at home. But apparently some of her younger female coworkers ate it up, impressed by the bravado and the stories. Things went sideways when we were near the bar, right in the middle of the main ballroom, where everyone could see. I was grabbing Elise a drink, something with vodka and cranberry if I remember correctly, when he just walked up out of nowhere. No introduction, no pleasantries, no excuse me or mind if I join you. Just, so you're the husband, while looking me up and down like I was a used car with questionable mileage and a suspicious history. Heard a lot about you. The way he said it dripped with condescension, like he'd already formed his opinion and found me lacking. I handed Elise her drink and turned to face him properly, squaring my shoulders and meeting his gaze directly. Hope it was all good. I kept my tone light, conversational, giving him every opportunity to back down and make this a normal interaction. He laughed, but it had zero humor in it. One of those fake laughs that's really just a show of dominance. She mentions you sometimes. Quiet type, right? Office job, keeps to himself, doesn't make waves. The way he said it made it sound like a character flaw, like being quiet was somehow equivalent to being weak or ineffectual. Elise stepped closer to me, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. Maybe we should, she started, trying to diffuse the situation before it escalated. Let the men talk, he cut her off without even glancing her way, dismissing her completely. His eyes stayed locked on mine, challenging, aggressive. I'm just curious what kind of man lets his wife work late with all these characters around. You know, late nights at the office, business trips, after-hours meetings. Don't you ever wonder what's really going on? The conversations around us started dying down. I could feel people turning to watch, but I kept my voice level. The kind who trusts his wife and doesn't need to mark territory at office parties. His face darkened. Territory? This isn't about territory. This is about protection. A real man makes sure his woman feels safe. I took a sip of my drink, let the silence hang there. She does feel safe. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey. Look at you! What happens if someone actually threatens her? You gonna bore them to death with spreadsheets? The circle of onlookers was growing. I could see Elise's face in my peripheral vision. Embarrassed, but also something else I couldn't quite read. Her coworkers were watching like this was dinner theater. Interesting question, I said, setting my drink down. What exactly did you have in mind? That's when he made his first mistake. He put his hand on my chest and shoved me backward. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to make his point in front of everyone. Maybe someone who can actually stand up for her, he said loud enough for half the room to hear. Not some pencil pusher who... I moved before he finished the sentence. Years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu kicked in without conscious thought. I grabbed his wrist, stepped into his space, and used his own momentum against him. Basic technique, clean execution, devastatingly effective. His feet left the ground, his back hit the marble floor, and the sound echoed through the ballroom like a fire shot. The room went dead silent. He tried to get up immediately, probably more embarrassed than hurt. That's when I made my position clear. I placed my foot on his chest, not enough pressure to injure, but enough to keep him exactly where he was. You wanted to know what real protection looks like, I said, my voice carrying in the silence. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't brag, and it sure as hell doesn't need to prove anything at Christmas parties. He was gasping, both from impact and rage. Get off me! I'm not done talking. I pressed down just slightly. You see, a real man doesn't need to tell everyone how tough he is. He doesn't need to intimidate women at work or challenge their husbands at social events. And he definitely doesn't put his hands on people who haven't given him permission. Security was pushing through the crowd now, but they were taking their time, probably trying to figure out what they'd walked into. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to apologize to my wife for your behavior tonight. You're going to keep your opinions about our marriage to yourself. And you're going to remember this moment every time you think about disrespecting either of us again. I stepped back, letting him sit up. He was red-faced, furious, completely humiliated in front of his coworkers. Instead of taking the graceful exit I'd offered, he chose to double down. You think you're tough? He snarled, scrambling to his feet. Let's see how tough you really are. He swung at me with everything he had. I didn't move away. I moved into it. The counter was swift and surgical. I deflected his punch, grabbed his arm, and introduced his face to my knee. The crack was audible throughout the ballroom. He dropped like a stone. This time he wasn't getting back up. Crimson red pooled on the marble floor beneath his broken nose. The silence was deafening, broken only by his labored breathing and someone calling for an ambulance. Security finally reached us, moving with obvious caution. Two guys in cheap suits who suddenly looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sir, I need you to step away from him, the lead guard said nervously. I was already stepping back, hands visible, posture relaxed. No problem. He attacked me twice. There are about 50 witnesses. The guard looked around at the crowd of frozen faces, then down at the guy on the floor. What happened here? Before I could answer, Elise's voice cut through the tension. He shoved my husband first, then tried to punch him. Her voice was steady, but I could hear something new in it, something I'd never heard before. A woman from accounting nodded vigorously. That's exactly what happened. This guy started the whole thing, got aggressive, pushed him, then threw a punch. More voices joined in, corroborating the story. Amazing how differently people see things when the dust settles. Half an hour ago, some of these same people were watching like it was entertainment. Now they were eager to distance themselves from the aggressor. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Professional, efficient, asking the right questions. The guy on the floor was conscious but groggy, red fluid streaming from his nose, possible concussion. They loaded him onto a stretcher with practiced ease. As they wheeled him past me, he managed to lock eyes with mine. Even through his obvious pain and humiliation, I could see the rage burning there. This wasn't over for him. Good. Some lessons need reinforcement. The hotel manager appeared, looking like he'd rather be dealing with literally anything else. He pulled me aside while the paramedics worked. Sir, I need to understand what happened here. I explained it simply, factually. He pushed me. I defended myself. He attacked me. I stopped him. The manager's relief was visible when I assured him I had no intention of suing the hotel. We have cameras throughout the ballroom, he said. Everything should be recorded. Perfect. Then you'll see exactly what I just told you. While I dealt with logistics, I watched Elise out of the corner of my eye. She was surrounded by coworkers, answering rapid-fire questions with a dazed expression. The woman I'd married was conflict-averse, always looking to smooth things over. But tonight she'd stood up for me without hesitation. Her supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, approached me after the manager walked away. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. We all knew he was problematic, but we never imagined he'd do something like this. Problematic how? She glanced around nervously. Comments about the women in the office? Nothing actionable, but inappropriate. Your wife complained to HR twice about things he said to her. This was news to me. Elise had mentioned he was annoying, but she'd never said anything about HR complaints. I filed that information away for later discussion. What kind of comments? Patricia hesitated. He told her once that if she ever got tired of being married to a soft man, he could show her what a real relationship felt like. Another time he cornered her in the break room and asked if she knew how to handle a woman like her. The rage that shot through me was white hot and instant. I had to consciously relax my fists. When did this happen? The past few months. She tried to handle it professionally, didn't want to make waves, but tonight, she looked toward where the paramedics had taken him. I think we all understand now why she wasn't worried about having you handle it. Elise appeared at my elbow, having extracted herself from the crowd. Can we go home now? The police had already taken statements from multiple witnesses. The hotel security footage would back up everything. There was nothing left to do except watch the remaining party guests pretend they weren't staring at us. As we waited for the valet to bring our car, Elise was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. I never told you about the things he said to me. Patricia mentioned something. I thought I could handle it myself. I thought if I just ignored him, he'd get bored and move on. She turned to face me. I was wrong. The valet pulled up with our car. As I tipped him and held the door for Elise, I could feel eyes watching us from the hotel lobby. Word would spread fast through her office. By Monday morning, everyone would know exactly what happened. You want to know something interesting? I said as we pulled out of the parking garage. He called me a pencil pusher tonight, implied I was weak because I work in an office. Elise looked at me curiously. What's interesting about that? He works in an office too. Same building as you, in fact. Spends his days in meetings and conference calls, just like me. But somehow he convinced himself that gym membership and a truck made him more of a man. I glanced over at her. Funny how that works. She was quiet for several blocks. Then, I've never seen you fight before. I don't fight, I end fights. What's the difference? I considered the question. Fighting is about proving something. Ending fights is about protecting something. When we got home, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, still in her party dress. I loosened my tie and joined her. What happens now? She asked. Now he learns that actions have consequences. And your coworkers learn that quiet doesn't mean weak. She nodded slowly. I keep thinking about the look on his face when you put your foot on his chest. He was so shocked. He's been living in a world where his size and his mouth made him the alpha. Tonight he discovered he was just the loudest. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. I showed it to Elise. This isn't over. She read it and looked up at me with concern. Should we call the police? I deleted the message and set the phone aside. Let him make the next move. He's already proven he's not smart enough to quit while he's behind. The truth was, I hoped he would try something. Tonight had been defensive. Next time, I wouldn't need to hold back. Monday morning brought a phone call from Elise's HR department. Professional, polite, but clearly nervous. They needed to speak with both of us about the incident. I took the afternoon off work and met Elise at her office building. The corporate headquarters was one of those glass towers downtown, all marble lobbies and expensive artwork. We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. The HR director was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who got straight to business. We've reviewed the security footage from the hotel, spoken with witnesses, and received the police report. You acted in clear self-defense. She slid a tablet across the table, showing the ballroom's security camera feed. The footage was crystal clear. Him shoving me first, him throwing the punch, me ending it efficiently. Even without audio, his aggressive body language was obvious. However, she continued, we need to discuss the broader situation. This incident has brought some other issues to light. That's when the floodgates opened. Over the next hour, we learned that Elise wasn't his only target. 3 other women in the office had filed informal complaints about his behavior over the past year. Comments about their appearance, inappropriate questions about their personal lives, standing too close during conversations. Why wasn't anything done? Elise asked. The HR director shifted uncomfortably. The complaints were vague, no direct maltreatment, nothing we could definitively act on. He was careful to stay just inside the line, I said. Until Saturday night? Exactly. Saturday night, he crossed several lines very publicly. They showed us printouts of his social media posts from the weekend. Photos from his hospital bed claiming he'd been ambushed at a work party. Comments from his friends calling for revenge. Threats barely disguised as tough guy posturing. We've forwarded these to the police, the HR director said. But there's more. The company's IT department had been quietly monitoring his work communications after the previous complaints. What they found painted a picture of a man who saw his workplace as his personal hunting ground. Email threads with male coworkers where he rated female employees. Screenshots he'd taken of women's social media photos, shared in group chats with crude commentary. A detailed list he'd kept of which women in the office were married, single, or available for upgrade. Elise's name was highlighted throughout his communications. He'd been tracking her schedule, noting when she worked late, when I picked her up, when I didn't. He'd even researched me online. Screenshots of my LinkedIn profile, annotated with dismissive comments about my profession. "This is stalking," Elise said, her voice tight with anger. "It's definitely maltreatment," the HR director agreed, "and it creates a hostile work environment for multiple employees." The most damning evidence came from his browser history. He'd been looking up information about restraining orders, trying to figure out how to file one against me. He'd also researched attack charges, clearly planning to press charges for the incident. That plan had backfired spectacularly when the police reviewed the hotel's security footage and witness statements. Instead of me facing charges, he was looking at attack charges himself, plus potential stalking and maltreatment charges based on the evidence HR had uncovered. "What's the company's position?" I asked. "Termination effective immediately. We're also considering a restraining order to keep him away from the building and company events." Elise looked relieved, but I could see the stress of the past few days in her face. "What about the other women he targeted? Are they safe?" "We're offering counseling services and the option to transfer departments if anyone feels uncomfortable. We're also implementing additional security measures and updating our maltreatment policies." As we left the building, Elise was unusually quiet in the parking garage. She finally spoke. "I feel stupid." "Why?" "Because I didn't see it. All those months I thought he was just an annoying coworker. I didn't realize he was planning something." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're not responsible for his behavior. You reported what you could when you could. But you saw it immediately Saturday night. You knew exactly what kind of person he was. I had the advantage of seeing him when he dropped his mask. You had to work with him every day, maintain professional relationships. That's harder." We got in the car and sat in silence for a moment. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. "Don't answer it," Elise said quickly. I showed her the screen. "It's not him, it's the detective handling the case." The detective's news was straightforward. They had enough evidence to charge him with attack, maltreatment, and making terroristic threats. The social media posts and text messages had sealed his fate. His lawyer was already talking about a plea deal. "There's one more thing," the detective said. "We found something in his car when we executed the search warrant." "What kind of something?" "Photos of your wife. Leaving work, getting in your car, walking to lunch, taken over several weeks with a telephoto lens." The rage that had been simmering since Saturday night flared white hot. "How many photos?" "Over 100. Some from inside your neighborhood, too." I looked at Elise, who had gone pale. "He was watching our house?" "Appears so. We're adding stalking charges to the list." After I hung up, we sat in the car, processing this new information. Elise was shaking, not from fear, but from anger. "He was watching me for months," she said. "Planning what exactly?" "It doesn't matter now, he's done. But what if you hadn't been there Saturday night? What if he'd cornered me somewhere else, somewhere private?" That was a thought I didn't want to pursue. He made his move in front of 50 witnesses because he thought he could intimidate me publicly. He was wrong about me, and now everyone knows it. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Just wanted you both to know, word has gotten around the office about what really happened. Everyone's talking about how he'd been maltreating multiple women and how you finally put a stop to it. You've got a lot of respect around here." I showed the message to Elise. For the first time since Saturday night, she smiled. "So I married the office hero." You married someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect. The hero part was just a bonus. As we drove home, I could see her confidence returning. The man who'd made her workplace uncomfortable was gone, his behavior was exposed, and everyone now knew that she had someone in her corner who wouldn't hesitate to act when it mattered. The only question remaining was whether he'd be smart enough to accept his defeat or stupid enough to escalate further. Given his track record, I wasn't optimistic about his decision-making skills. The next few weeks had shown everything about how Elise saw our marriage, her workplace, and herself. It started with small things I hadn't noticed before. She began leaving work exactly at closing time instead of staying late. When I asked about it, she shrugged and said she was reevaluating her priorities. Turned out those late nights hadn't been about dedication to her job. They'd been about avoiding him during his usual prowling hours in the office. I didn't even realize I was doing it, she admitted one evening over dinner. I'd schedule meetings earlier in the day, eat lunch at my desk, find reasons to leave the building when he was around. I was managing my entire work life around avoiding one person. The full scope of his maltreatment became clear as she felt safe enough to talk about it. The comments about her appearance that she'd brushed off as crude humor. The way he'd position himself to block her path in hallways, forcing her to squeeze past him. The questions about our relationship, disguised as friendly concern. He asked me once if you were the type to fight for me if another man showed interest, she said. I thought it was just small talk. What did you tell him? I said you didn't need to fight for me because you trusted me, she paused. I realize now he wasn't asking about trust. He was gathering intelligence. Her female coworkers had started opening up too, now that the threat was gone. Lunch conversations revealed a pattern of behavior that had made multiple women uncomfortable, but that none of them had felt they could address directly. We all just adapted, Elise explained, changed our routines, avoided being alone with him, warned the new hires without being too obvious about it. It was like having a predator in the office that we all just learned to work around. The revelation that hit her hardest came from Patricia during a department meeting. Elise had always prided herself on being professional, on handling workplace conflicts diplomatically. Learning that her measured approach had been interpreted as weakness was a wake-up call. Patricia told me that he used to brag about how easy I was to intimidate. Elise said, her voice tight with anger. He'd tell people that he could make me uncomfortable just by walking into a room, and I'd find an excuse to leave. Were you intimidated by him? She considered the question carefully. Not intimidated, more like I wanted to avoid confrontation. I thought that was the mature way to handle it. And now I realize that sometimes avoiding confrontation just enables the confrontational person. The change in her was visible at work. Her posture was different, more confident. She spoke up in meetings instead of deferring to louder voices. When male colleagues interrupted her, she finished her sentences anyway. Small changes, but noticeable ones. More importantly, she started seeing our relationship through a different lens. We'd been married for 5 years, and she'd always appreciated that I wasn't the jealous type, that I didn't need to mark my territory or make a show of possession. She'd interpreted that as modern masculinity, evolved thinking. I thought guys who felt the need to protect their wives were insecure, she told me one night. Like they didn't trust their partners to handle themselves. What changed your mind? Watching you that night. You weren't protecting me because you thought I was weak. You were protecting me because someone was actively threatening me. There's a difference. She'd started noticing things about me that she'd previously taken for granted, the way I automatically positioned myself between her and potential threats when we walked at night. How I'd insist on checking out strange sounds in the house instead of sending her to investigate. Small protective instincts that she'd never really registered before. I always thought that stuff was outdated gender role nonsense, she said. But there's something reassuring about being with someone who can handle himself when it matters. The most significant change was in how she talked about the incident itself. Initially, she'd been embarrassed by the public nature of the confrontation, worried about what her coworkers would think. Now she wore it almost like a badge of honor. Jennifer from accounting told me her husband would have just called security, she said with obvious pride. She said most of the wives were jealous that I had someone who would actually step up. How does that make you feel? Protected. Really protected for the first time in years. The shift in our dynamic was subtle but unmistakable, and she asked my opinion on workplace conflicts instead of just venting about them. When we were out together, she stayed closer, more physically connected. At home, she was more affectionate, more attentive. I feel like I'm seeing you clearly for the first time, she told me. I married a man I thought was gentle and kind. Turns out I married a man who's gentle and kind until someone crosses the line. The incident had also changed how she viewed other men. The loud, boastful types she'd previously found amusing now struck her as compensation for insecurity. The quiet confidence she'd once overlooked in other husbands suddenly seemed more attractive. He used to talk about his hunting trips, his truck, his workout routine, she said, referring to her former tormentor. Always had to be the center of attention, always had to one-up everyone else's stories. I thought that was just his personality. What do you think it was now? Overcompensation. Real confidence doesn't need an audience. 2 weeks after the incident, she came home with news that surprised me. The company had offered her a promotion to a different department, partly as compensation for the maltreatment she'd endured, but also because her newfound assertiveness had impressed upper management. Patricia said, I've been more decisive in meetings lately, more willing to challenge bad ideas instead of just going along to keep the peace. Are you going to take it? Absolutely. Clean slate, new environment, and a 20% raise. That evening, as we celebrated her promotion, she brought up something that had been on her mind. I owe you an apology, she said. For what? For not telling you how bad it was getting, for thinking I had to handle everything myself, for not trusting you to handle it the right way. You handled it exactly right. You reported it through proper channels, documented everything, stayed professional. The only thing you couldn't have predicted was him escalating to physical confrontation. But if I'd told you everything from the beginning, I would have handled it differently. Probably more aggressively. Definitely less legally. She laughed at that. So my way was better. Your way built a case. My way ended it. Looking back, I realized that the incident had revealed something about both of us. She'd learned that strength didn't always mean confrontation. And I'd learned that sometimes confrontation was exactly what strength looked like. The man who tried to intimidate my wife had inadvertently strengthened our marriage. His pathetic attempt at dominance had shown both of us what real protection looked like, what real confidence felt like, and what real partnership meant. He was about to learn that some lessons are more expensive than others. 3 weeks after the Christmas party, I got a call from Elise's company lawyer. They needed me to attend a final meeting to close out the incident. The terminated employee wanted to clear the air before his criminal trial. I should have known it was a setup. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in the company's main conference room. When I arrived, he was already there, with his lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the minute. Elise's HR director was present, along with building security and a court stenographer. Everything official, everything documented. He looked different than he had at the party. The swelling in his face had gone down, but his nose sat at a slightly different angle now. His left eye still showed traces of bruising. Most importantly, his cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by barely contained rage. I want to make something clear, he said as soon as I sat down. What happened at that party was a fluke. You got lucky. His lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm, but he shrugged it off. I wasn't ready for you. I underestimated you. That won't happen again. The HR director started to intervene, but I held up a hand. Let him talk. I want this on record. You think you're some kind of tough guy now? You think breaking my nose makes you a man? His voice was rising, despite his lawyer's obvious discomfort. I know where you work. I know where you live. I know your routine. That crossed the line from posturing into direct threat. The security guards shifted in their chairs, ready to intervene. Are you threatening me? I asked calmly. I'm promising you, next time we meet, it won't be at some fancy party with witnesses. It'll be somewhere private where you can't hide behind lawyers and security cameras. His lawyer was frantically taking notes, probably calculating how many additional charges his client had just earned himself. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. That's interesting, because right now you're violating the restraining order just by being in the same building as my wife. You're making terroristic threats in front of multiple witnesses. And you're stupid enough to do it all while being recorded by a court stenographer. The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation hit him. But here's what's really interesting, I continued. You still think this is about toughness. You still think the reason you lost is because you weren't ready or because the circumstances weren't right. You still don't understand what actually happened that night. Enlighten me, he snarled. You didn't lose because I got lucky. You lost because you're exactly the kind of man you pretend not to be. Weak, insecure, the kind who needs to bully women to feel powerful, the kind who makes threats instead of taking action. I stood up slowly and he instinctively shrank back in his chair. You want to know the difference between us? I don't need to tell people I'm dangerous. I don't need to make threats. I don't need to stalk women or intimidate coworkers to feel like a man. His lawyer was pulling at his sleeve, trying to get him to stop talking, but he was too far gone to listen. We'll see, he muttered. We'll see how tough you are when what? When you follow through on your threats? When you escalate this beyond words? I smiled. Please do, because next time, I won't stop at a broken nose. The meeting ended abruptly after that. Security escorted him from the building while his lawyer frantically made phone calls, probably trying to arrange a better plea deal before his client dug himself any deeper. The HR director looked shaken. Should we be concerned about retaliation? He's not smart enough for effective retaliation. He just proved that by making threats in front of witnesses. His parole officer will have him back in custody by tomorrow morning. I was right. By Wednesday, he was arrested for violating his restraining order and making terroristic threats. His plea deal evaporated and he was looking at serious jail time. The final chapter came 6 months later. Elise's new department was thriving. Her confidence at work had completely transformed, and our marriage was stronger than it had ever been. As for him, he spent 8 months in county jail, lost his professional license, and had to relocate to another state when he was released. Last I heard, he was working construction and keeping a much lower profile. Some men learn from their mistakes. Others just learn that their mistakes have consequences. Either way, the lesson gets taught. 1 year later, life had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and completely transformed. Elise thrived in her new position, leading projects with the kind of confidence that earned respect rather than demanded it. The promotion had been just the beginning. The Christmas party incident became something of a legend in her company, not because of the violence, but because of what it represented. A line in the sand, a statement that maltreatment wouldn't be tolerated, that consequences were real, and that some people had others who would step up when necessary. Jennifer from accounting got engaged last month, Elise told me over dinner. She said her fiancé reminded her of you, quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. How's that make you feel? Proud, like I married the right man for the right reasons. The incident had changed how other couples in our social circle interacted too. Husbands who had previously been passive about disrespect toward their wives started speaking up. The standard for what constituted acceptable behavior had shifted, and everyone seemed to benefit from the clarity. Elise's workplace had implemented new policies, additional security measures, and mandatory training on maltreatment. The other women who had been targeted by him found their voices, filed formal complaints about past incidents, and helped create a safer environment for everyone. Patricia told me something interesting yesterday, Elise said. She said the office culture completely changed after what happened. Men are more respectful, women are more confident, and everyone's more productive because nobody's wasting energy managing around problem behavior. The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. He pled guilty to multiple charges, served his time, and disappeared from our lives entirely. No appeals, no continued threats, no dramatic prison letters, just consequences applied and lessons learned. Do you ever think about him? Elise asked. Sometimes. I wonder if he learned anything or if he just learned to be more careful about who he targets. Does it matter? Not to us, but it might matter to whoever he meets next. Our marriage had found a new equilibrium, built on complete honesty and mutual respect. She no longer tried to handle everything alone, and I no longer assumed she'd tell me if something was seriously wrong. We communicated better, trusted deeper, and appreciated each other more. I used to think strength meant handling everything yourself, she reflected. Now I know it means knowing when to ask for help and who to ask. The most satisfying part wasn't the victory itself, but watching Elise reclaim her confidence. She spoke differently at work, carried herself with more authority, and never again tolerated disrespect from anyone. The woman who had once tried to manage around conflict now addressed it head-on. Someone new started in accounting last week, she told me. Young guy, fresh out of college. He made some comment about how I must have gotten my promotion through connections rather than merit. What did you do? I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if he ever questioned my qualifications again, He'd find out exactly how I handled disrespect. Then I walked away. How'd that work out? He apologized the next day and asked if I had time to mentor him on the project he was struggling with. That was the real victory, not the broken nose, or the jail time, or the public humiliation. The real victory was Elise discovering that she didn't need to shrink herself to make others comfortable. She could take up space, speak with authority, and expect respect without apology. The Christmas party incident had become a defining moment for both of us, not because of what I did that night, but because of what we both learned about ourselves and each other. Some people spend their whole lives wondering what they're made of. We found out in a hotel ballroom on a December evening, and we liked what we discovered. As for him, justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and life had moved forward. The best revenge wasn't the physical defeat or the legal consequences. It was building something better in the space where his toxicity used to exist. Every day, Elise went to work confident and unafraid was a victory. Every decision she made from a position of strength rather than fear was a triumph. Every moment of peace in our marriage was proof that sometimes the right response to a bully is ending the conversation permanently. The man who thought he could intimidate my wife had accidentally given us both exactly what we needed: clarity about who we were, what we were capable of, and what we meant to each other. Some gifts come in the strangest packages.